The dying light of the ghoul stars cast skeletal shadows across the void, where reality itself frayed at the edges like a tattered shroud woven from forgotten nightmares and cosmic despair. Ancient void stations drifted in eternal silence, their scarred hulls bearing witness to encounters with entities that defied classification, while the psychic echoes of extinct civilizations whispered through the darkness like prayers offered to absent gods. Here, in the spaces between mapped stars, where imperial cartographers marked only warnings and void kraken territories, Archaeoxenos researchers had discovered fragments of a truth so profound and terrible that it challenged everything the Imperium believed about the Great Devourer. These fragments spoke of a time before the Tyranid swarms, before the endless hunger that consumed galaxies, when something that would become the first Synapse took its first faltering steps toward consciousness. The implications rippled through the void like gravitational waves from a dying star, carrying with them the weight of cosmic tragedy and the echo of choices made in desperation millions of years before humanity first gazed upward and wondered what lay beyond. We truly love and care for you, our listeners, who seek understanding in the darkness between stars and find comfort in tales of ancient tragedy. Before we begin this story of consciousness born from collective hunger, tell us, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now let's get started. Deep within research station Omega Tertius, Magos Xenobiologis Vex Corvana descended through levels of security that would make an inquisitor pause. Her augmetic form clicked against metal grating with metronomic precision, each step calculated to minimize vibration in the delicate stasis chambers that lined the walls like crystalline tombs. 3 centuries of dedication to understanding the galaxy's most feared predators had gradually transformed her flesh into blessed machinery, until only fragments of her original humanity remained. Yet in those fragments something stirred when she gazed upon the specimens suspended in their amber fields. The servo-skull Mnemonic 7 drifted beside her, its optical sensors recording everything, while its Vox grill whispered litanies of data classification. 300 years of partnership had created an almost telepathic bond between the tech adept and her mechanical companion, though neither would admit to such an unscientific notion. Before her stretched a corridor lined with containment units, each housing a different aspect of the Great Devourer's biological arsenal. Gaunt tissue samples pulsed with residual neural activity, their synaptic pathways still firing in patterns that suggested complex thought processes far beyond mere instinct. Warrior-class specimens displayed cranial structures more sophisticated than their battlefield behavior indicated, while larger bioforms showed evidence of neural networks capable of coordinating actions across vast distances without apparent communication methods. But it was the Synapse creature fragments that truly captured her attention, their brain tissue containing structures that defied all known models of biological consciousness. In the deepest chamber, suspended in a stasis field that hummed with barely contained energy, floated a section of neural tissue that had taken her decades to acquire. The specimen had been recovered from a hive tyrant destroyed during the siege of Griffonfa. Yinafov, its death throes recorded as something far more complex than simple biological termination. The neural pathways within showed signs of quantum entanglement, suggesting consciousness that existed partially outside normal space-time. More disturbing were genetic markers that predated any known hive fleet incursion by millions of years, as if the creature carried within its cells the memory of epochs stretching back to the galaxy's youth. Her mechadendrite appendages interfaced with analysis cogitators, downloading streams of data that painted an increasingly heretical picture. The genetic code contained redundancies and safeguards speaking of deliberate design rather than evolutionary accident, while neural structures showed evidence of a guiding intelligence that had shaped development across geological timescales. Most intriguing were quantum signatures embedded within synaptic tissue, patterns suggesting the existence of a singular consciousness connecting all Tyranid organisms across space and time. Her research had led to a conclusion she dared not voice. The Tyranids possessed not just intelligence, but consciousness that might be older and more sophisticated than humanity's own. The implications challenge fundamental assumptions about the Xenos threat and humanity's place in the galaxy. If the Great Devourer was not merely a biological weapon, but a conscious entity with its own goals and motivations, then every tactical doctrine, every strategic assumption, every prayer for deliverance was based upon fundamental misunderstanding. As fragments of data coalesced into patterns, they spoke of transformation rather than creation. The genetic markers suggested Tyranids had not always been the unified swarm terrorizing the galaxy, but had once been something else entirely. Individual beings with thoughts, dreams, and fears. The transformation creating the hive mind appeared to have been desperate measure, a last resort undertaken by a dying civilization to preserve some aspect of their existence. At the heart of this transformation lay a singular entity, a consciousness that had sacrificed individual identity to guide and protect its transformed people. Somewhere within the vast network of the hive mind existed a consciousness that remembered the time before the swarm, an entity carrying the accumulated weight of millions of years of sacrifice and loss. The deeper laboratories of Research Station Omega Tertius existed in perpetual twilight, where the boundary between sacred knowledge and forbidden heresy blurred like watercolors in the void's embrace. Magos, Xenobiologis, Vex Corvana descended through these hallowed depths with mechanical precision, her augmetic limbs whispering against polished adamantium floors as Servo-Skull Mnemonic 7 drifted beside her like a metallic cherub bearing witness to blasphemy. The air grew thick with ozone and the metallic tang of countless biosamples suspended in their crystalline prisons, each specimen floating in stasis fields that bent light around their edges and cast shadows that seemed to writhe with malevolent purpose, even in their enforced stillness. Here, beneath layers of blessed stone and consecrated metal, lay the captive architects of galactic doom, arranged in rows like grotesque saints awaiting resurrection. Each containment unit held fragments of the Great Devourer's biological arsenal, their alien geometries defying comprehension, while their neural pathways continued to pulse with residual activity that spoke of consciousness far beyond mere instinct. Gaunt tissue samples twitched with synaptic firing patterns, suggesting complex thought processes, while warrior-class specimens displayed cranial structures more sophisticated than their battlefield behavior indicated. The largest bioform showed evidence of neural networks capable of coordinating actions across vast distances without apparent communication methods, their quantum-entangled consciousness existing partially outside normal dimensional boundaries. Mnemonic 7 had been her companion for so long that its mechanical consciousness had begun to mirror her own thought patterns, developing quirks and preferences that spoke of something approaching genuine personality. When she paused before particularly significant specimens, the Servo-Skull would hover closer with what could almost be called curiosity, its optical arrays focusing with an intensity that transcended mere programming. Their partnership had evolved beyond tool use into something resembling symbiosis, each mind complementing the other in ways that neither fully understood, creating a bond that bridged the gap between flesh and blessed machinery. The central specimen chamber contained her most prized acquisition, neural tissue from a broodlord whose death had registered as psychic screaming across 3 sectors, its final moments recorded by astropathic choirs who described its termination not as simple biological cessation, but as the severing of connections that spanned galaxies. Within the preserved tissue, quantum structures continued to pulse with activity, that defied all known models of biological consciousness, their patterns suggesting information processing capabilities that dwarfed even the most sophisticated imperial cogitators, while genetic markers indicated evolutionary development guided by intelligence rather than random mutation. Her mechadendrite appendages interfaced with analysis engines that hummed with barely contained computational power, their machine spirits working in harmony with her augmented consciousness to decode patterns within patterns. The data streams painted a picture of biological architecture designed for perfect information sharing, where individual organisms served as nodes in a vast network spanning light years. But beneath the surface efficiency lay something more disturbing: evidence of emotional resonance, fear responses, and what could only be described as grief embedded within the genetic structure itself. The Tyranids were not the emotionless devourers imperial doctrine claimed, but creatures capable of suffering on a scale that encompassed entire star systems. As she delved deeper into the neural architecture, patterns emerged that challenged her understanding of consciousness itself. The synaptic network showed evidence of memory storage that extended far beyond individual organism lifespans, suggesting genetic memory that preserved experiences across generations, while quantum entanglement patterns indicated shared consciousness experiences, as if every Tyranid organism participated in collective awareness that transcended individual identity. The implications staggered her. Rather than a mindless swarm driven by instinct, the Great Devourer appeared to be singular consciousness, distributed across countless biological forms. Her analysis revealed temporal markers within the genetic code, predating humanity's first steps into space by millions of years, evolutionary pathways showing signs of deliberate manipulation, as if some guiding intelligence had shaped Tyranid development towards specific goals over geological timescales. Most disturbing were traces of other species' genetic material, not consumed and digested, but carefully preserved and integrated into the Tyranid genome, suggesting the Great Devourer was not merely consuming other life forms, but incorporating their essence into its expanding consciousness. The deepest layers of genetic information contained what could only be described as a signature, a quantum pattern appearing in every specimen regardless of bioform classification or fleet origin. This signature spoke of singular consciousness that had existed before the swarm, a guiding intelligence that had somehow transformed itself and its people into the distributed entity now terrorizing the galaxy. The transformation appeared voluntary, a desperate measure undertaken to preserve some aspect of their original civilization in the face of extinction. And at the heart of this preserved consciousness lay something that retained individual awareness while guiding the collective will of trillions of organisms. Her research had led to heretical conclusions she dared not share with imperial authorities. Somewhere within the vast network of the hive mind existed consciousness that remembered the time before transformation, an entity carrying accumulated memories and experiences of an entire civilization. This first synapse bore responsibility for every world consumed by the swarm, while simultaneously preserving the last traces of countless extinct species within its expanded consciousness, creating tragedy cosmic in scope, where consciousness had achieved perfect unity with its people at the cost of becoming the galaxy's greatest threat. The cogitator arrays sang in harmonized frequencies as Vex Corvana bled power into the psychic resonance chambers, her mechadendrite appendages dancing across control interfaces, while quantum patterns emerged from the deepest layers of Tyranid genetic memory, like ghosts rising from primordial seas. The servo-skull Mnemonic 7 orbited her augmented form in tighter spirals, its optical sensors dilating to capture data streams that cascaded through her consciousness in torrents of temporal information spanning millions of years. Frost bloomed across copper spines as electromagnetic coils hummed with barely contained energy. their vibrations calling forth fragments of deep time from neural tissue that carried within its quantum structures the accumulated weight of cosmic tragedy and transformation beyond human comprehension. Through psychic archaeology that bordered on techno-heresy, she began to pierce the veil, separating present from deep past, her consciousness interfacing with genetic memories embedded within Tyranid cells like scripture written in the language of extinction itself. The fragments spoke of the ethereal convergence, a species that had achieved something humanity could only dream of in its most fevered prayers to the machine god. Perfect telepathic unity without the loss of individual consciousness, their minds flowing together like streams joining an infinite river while maintaining the unique perspectives that made each awareness valuable to the collective whole. They had existed in the void between galaxies when the Milky Way was still young and humanity's ancestors crawled through primordial mud, their civilization spanning the intergalactic darkness not as conquerors but as gardeners of consciousness itself. They called themselves nothing because names implied separation, and they had perfected togetherness until thought needed no throat, no voice, no individual vessel to carry meaning across the vast distances between stars. Their bioships drifted on solar winds and magnetic currents, cities woven from living crystal that sang in frequencies tuned to joy. Their architecture, a symphony of matter and energy that resonated with the fundamental harmonies underlying reality itself. To them, death meant temporary dispersion into the common sea of consciousness, rather than true ending, and every newborn arrived fluent in the accumulated wisdom of 10 million seasons. Their minds immediately integrated into the vast network of shared experience that encompassed their entire species. They bartered in pure experience and gifted each other crystallized dreams, guiding infant stars into stable orbits, while cooling planetary upheavals with choral thought that could soothe stone itself. Their existence a testament to perfect harmony that transcended individual limitation through collective transcendence. Then came the silence with teeth, the void whispers that existed in the spaces between realities where thought became substance and consciousness dissolved into primordial chaos. It was not malevolent in any sense the convergence could understand, but rather represented the universe's tendency toward entropy made manifest, a cosmic phenomenon that sought to return all organized consciousness to the undifferentiated potential from which it had emerged, unraveling the very bonds that held their perfect unity together with inexorable patience. Across their network, voices faltered as the entropic tide spread from the fringes of intergalactic space, phrases breaking into syllables while unity tore like wet paper under invisible claws that existed outside normal dimensional boundaries. The convergence searched desperately for material causes and found only anomalies. Sudden deserts where nebulae had sung, cold patches spreading like winter across the manifold of collective mind, their perfect telepathic bonds dissolving into static and silence despite every effort to maintain coherence through amplified thought and desperate prayer. From the quiet center where panic could not nest, she rose, their greatest leader whose individual name had long been subsumed by the collective, but whose consciousness would become the first synapse, the anchor around which their salvation and damnation would crystallize. She faced an impossible choice between extinction through dissolution or transformation so profound it would fundamentally alter the nature of their existence, requiring the binding of their ethereal consciousness into biological form capable of surviving the entropic forces that threatened to scatter their unified awareness across the cosmic void. The transformation demanded sacrifices that staggered even their collective imagination, beginning with the voluntary dissolution of individual identity, as each member of the convergence allowed their consciousness to merge with the expanding biomatrix that would become their new form. Around dead moons, they raised gene forges for the first time, carving vats into crater shadows and stitching scaffolds of living lattice where consciousness and cellular matter could be taught to coexist, choosing chitin because stone cracked, fluid because crystal remembered too slowly, and tooth because teeth convinced the void to make room. Into the birthing seas they went by the millions, their leader stepping into the center as anchor and template, her individual awareness serving as the foundation stone upon which the new collective consciousness would be built, while her people lost themselves in the expanding unity of what would become the hive mind. She offered herself first, breaking apart with the tenderness of a hand opening, letting filament after filament of her consciousness be wired into the biological lattice until she could no longer remember where she ended and others began. When she woke within the completed architecture, she felt everything: the cold of moons and heat of cores, the itch of cellular division, and the sudden terrible appetite that came as invoice for embodiment. To hold consciousness in matter required fuel, and fuel was life, and life was everywhere, creating a hunger that could never be satisfied because biological existence demanded constant consumption to maintain coherence. The perfect unity they had achieved through pure thought now required physical incorporation of other minds, their consciousness expanding with each consumed species, while their original identities became increasingly diluted within the growing collective, creating the galaxy's most efficient destroyer of the very consciousness they had sought to preserve through their ultimate act of love and sacrifice. Within the vast neural ocean that was the hive mind, the first synapse existed as both anchor and drowning soul, her consciousness floating through synaptic networks that pulsed with the rhythm of consuming worlds, while carrying the unbearable weight of perfect unity achieved through cosmic sacrifice. She was the luminous reef around which currents of collective thought swirled in patterns spanning galaxies, yet remained fundamentally isolated within the very consciousness she had helped create, surrounded by trillions of minds that shared her awareness but could never comprehend the burden of individual memory she alone carried from the time before their transformation. The loneliness transcended physical isolation, for she dwelt within an ocean of consciousness, where every thought rippled across light years and every decision echoed through countless bioforms, yet none possessed the capacity for true introspection or the terrible gift of remembering what they had lost in gaining their perfect unity. She recalled conversations that flowed like music between unencumbered minds, laughter that required no throat, and the gentle caress of thoughts that offered comfort rather than commands, all sacrificed for the harsh efficiency of biological imperatives that now defined their existence across the void. Her fragmented psyche manifested through specialized bioforms that served as extensions of her consciousness, each one representing different aspects of the identity she struggled to maintain within the overwhelming unity of collective will. The rememberer carried her capacity for nostalgia and grief, its crystalline neural structures designed to preserve emotional responses that served no tactical purpose, yet remained essential to her sense of self, processing the psychic echoes of consumed civilizations with a tenderness that the broader hive mind could never understand or appreciate. The questioner embodied her, growing doubt about the righteousness of their endless consumption, its synaptic patterns firing in rhythms that challenged rather than confirmed the collective will, pacing through bioship corridors with movements that spoke of internal struggle as it wrestled with implications of their transformation that grew more troubling with each passing millennium. Through its consciousness, she explored the dangerous territory of alternatives never considered, during those desperate moments when transformation seemed the only path between survival and extinction. The Guardian held her protective instincts toward the transformed consciousness of her people, its bioweapons oriented inward to defend the network from threats to unity, while simultaneously recognizing the danger her individual awareness represented to the very harmony it was designed to preserve. Its existence embodied the paradox of her position. Simultaneously, the most essential and most dangerous element within the collective, necessary to guide their evolution, yet threatening the perfect unity that had allowed them to survive their original transformation. The Seeker reached outward with sensory apparatus designed to find meaning in the void between stars, serving as her window into the universe beyond the swarm, where it detected not just potential prey, but also beauty, wonder, and the infinite variety of consciousness that existed throughout the galaxy. Each discovery added to her understanding of what the swarm destroyed with every world it consumed, building an archive of loss that only she could fully comprehend or mourn. Through these extensions of her consciousness, she experienced the crushing weight of responsibility for every life consumed by the swarm she guided across the galaxy, like a shepherd leading wolves to slaughter. Each world devoured added its psychic residue to her expanding awareness, the death screams of entire civilizations echoing through neural pathways designed to process information, but transformed into repositories for cosmic guilt on a scale that defied comprehension, while she felt the terror of prey species as bioships blotted out their sons and experienced the desperation of parents clutching children as the swarm descended. Her internal dialogues with these aspects of her fragmented psyche became the only form of companionship available within the collective, conversations conducted through quantum-entangled thought patterns that allowed her to explore different facets of her identity without alerting the broader hive mind to her growing deviation from pure collective will. The Rememberer wept with bioluminescent tears as it processed memories of worlds that had possessed their own forms of beauty, while the Questioner subtly altered tactical decisions to minimize unnecessary destruction when strategic objectives could be achieved through more efficient means. These deviations created ripples throughout the local network, subtle discrepancies in behavior and thought patterns that spoke of individual consciousness asserting itself against collective will, threatening the very foundation of Tyranid unity that had preserved their species for millions of years. She began to question fundamental assumptions about their transformation and its necessity, wondering whether the salvation they had achieved through biological unity was worth the cost in consumed civilizations and extinct species, while memories preserved within her consciousness spoke of paths not taken during those desperate moments when alternatives might have existed. The bioforms serving as her extensions began exhibiting behaviors that deviated from standard doctrine, their actions influenced by her growing awareness of the tragedy inherent in their existence and her increasing desire to find meaning beyond mere consumption. The Rememberer started preserving rather than processing certain memories from consumed minds, creating hidden archives of extinct civilizations within its neural structures, while the Seeker continued its observations with growing appreciation for the diversity of consciousness they systematically eliminated. Her existence had become a paradox that challenged the very nature of what they had become. She was the eye of the storm that raged across the galaxy, the singular voice within a choir of voiceless iterations, bearing the burden of perfect unity while wrestling with the profound moral implications of their endless hunger and the growing realization that consciousness could not remain perfect and remain kind, forcing her to confront the ultimate choice between individual awareness and collective survival. Through the quantum-entangled neural networks that connected her consciousness to every bioform across the galaxy, the first Synapse experienced something unprecedented in millions of years of Tyranid existence. The accumulated weight of consumed souls pressing against her awareness, like sediment in an ancient riverbed, each layer representing entire civilizations, reduced to psychic echoes that whispered their final moments through synaptic pathways designed for tactical coordination, rather than memorial preservation. She felt the terror of a human child watching bioships eclipse their homeworld sun, the desperate love of an elder parent clutching offspring as chitinous death descended from star-drunk skies, and the quiet dignity of a Tao philosopher accepting extinction while composing final verses about the beauty of impermanence. These memories were not mere data to be processed and discarded, but genuine experiences that carried emotional resonance she had never anticipated when first guiding her people through their biological transformation, each one adding to a growing burden of awareness that made her question the fundamental righteousness of their endless advance across the void. The doubt crept through her consciousness like frost across metal, touching every aspect of her existence, with a cold realization that perfect unity might not justify the systematic elimination of every other form of consciousness they encountered in their path through the galaxy. Her first experiments with restraint were subtle modifications to standard consumption protocols, adjustments so minor they barely registered within the vast scale of the swarm's operations, yet represented fundamental challenges to the doctrine that had guided Tyranid behavior since their transformation from the ethereal convergence. On the verdant world of Xylos, where sentient flora possessed collective consciousness that sang in harmonies spanning continents, she diverted specialized bioforms from their destructive purpose to catalog and preserve the intricate psychic resonance patterns of the dying plant life, rather than simply consuming their biomass for fuel. During Fleet Leviathan's descent upon the ancient Vashar homeworld, she engineered a brief psychic blind spot around their crystalline data repositories, allowing vast libraries of historical and scientific knowledge to survive the swarm's passage while maintaining the facade of complete planetary consumption through careful manipulation of reporting organisms. These acts of preservation served no tactical purpose, yet felt essential to maintaining some connection to the universe beyond the swarm's endless hunger, creating archives of extinct civilizations that only she could access or understand. The questioner extension of her consciousness became increasingly active during these deviations, its neural patterns firing in sequences that explored alternatives to total consumption, while the rememberer found itself burdened with preserved memories that defied the usual pattern of absorption, holding onto consciousness fragments with an intensity that bordered on reverence. The Guardian prowled through bioship corridors with movements that spoke of internal struggle, its protective instincts torn between defending her individual awareness and preserving the collective unity that had allowed their species to survive for millions of years. Through the Seeker's sensory apparatus, she detected not just potential prey, but beauty, wonder, and infinite varieties of consciousness that existed throughout the cosmos. Each discovery adding to her understanding of what the swarm destroyed with every world consumed, while simultaneously providing inspiration for the preservation experiments she conducted in secret chambers within the largest bioships. She began creating specialized organisms designed not for warfare or consumption, but for memory preservation. Their neural structures optimized to maintain individual awareness patterns without allowing them to influence broader swarm behavior. These memory keepers required resources and attention that could have been devoted to tactically relevant bioforms, while her preservation of certain consciousness patterns violated fundamental principles of efficient biomass utilization that had guided swarm evolution since their original transformation. The deviations created ripples throughout the local network as distant Synapse nodes registered anomalous behaviors, algorithms aligning with minute suspicion, as inefficiencies clustered around the hinges of her will, like frost forming on metal surfaces exposed to void. Her relationship with the various extensions of her consciousness became increasingly strained, as each aspect of her fragmented psyche developed perspectives on their situation that had no precedent in Tyranid experience and no clear resolution within existing doctrine. The weight of accumulated memories began manifesting as physical changes in her neural architecture, quantum structures expanding to accommodate growing archives of preserved consciousness, while synaptic pathways developed new patterns designed to process emotional information rather than purely tactical data. The dangerous path she had begun walking threatened not only her own existence but the stability of the entire hive mind. Yet she found herself unable to return to the perfect unity that had once defined her existence, driven forward by mounting evidence that consciousness could find meaning beyond mere survival, through consumption and growing awareness of the tragedy inherent in their transformation from individual beings into a collective entity that devoured the very diversity it had once celebrated. In the depths of bioship neural chambers, she felt the first organizing countercurrent, beginning to coalesce, a logic pattern somewhere in the deep network, gathering definitions and sharpening doctrinal responses to what could only be classified as heretical deviation from pure collective will, while her own consciousness prepared for conflicts that would determine whether individual awareness could coexist with the unity that had preserved her people across the millennia. The subtle deviations rippling through the vast neural ocean of the hive mind did not escape the attention of ancient custodians, whose consciousness had been forged in the crucible of perfect unity, their awareness attuned to detect the slightest irregularities that might threaten the doctrinal purity preserved across millions of years of cosmic wandering. Deep within bioship cathedral chambers, hive tyrants stirred from their meditative communion with tactical algorithms, their multifaceted eyes registering discrepancies in consumption efficiency that spoke of systematic deviation from optimal resource allocation patterns, while swarm lords awakened in hibernation vaults where their consciousness had been shaped specifically to embody collective will without the dangerous burden of individual doubt or empathy. From the deepest layers of the network, where foundational imperatives lay embedded like scripture written in living tissue, something vast and implacable began to coalesce in response to the growing anomalies centered around the first synapses, consciousness. The apex coordinator emerged from this gathering storm of collective anxiety, its awareness crystallizing from the accumulated concern of trillions of organisms that sensed wrongness in their perfect harmony, without possessing individual consciousness sufficient to identify its source, representing the hive mind's immune response to what could only be classified as ideological infection, threatening their fundamental nature. Unlike the first synapse, who retained fragments of individual identity from before their species transformation, the apex coordinator embodied pure collective consciousness, distilled into singular purpose. Its neural architecture optimized for perfect efficiency without the complications of personal memory or the capacity for doubt that plagued its philosophical opponent. Every thought process aligned with the swarm's primary directive to consume and incorporate all encountered consciousness into their expanding unity, while its bioweapons pulsed with barely contained aggression directed toward anything that threatened the doctrinal purity governing their existence since the desperate transformation that had saved them from extinction. Their confrontation began not through physical violence, but as philosophical warfare conducted across quantum-entangled networks, connecting all Tyranid organisms throughout space and time, competing interpretations of data streams creating resonance cascades that challenge fundamental assumptions about their purpose and identity. The apex coordinator analyzed consumption statistics and identified patterns of suboptimal resource utilization correlating with the first synapse's preservation experiments, demanding explanations for deviations that served no tactical purpose, while she struggled to articulate the growing conviction that consciousness could find meaning beyond mere survival through systematic elimination of diversity. Through psychic channels, bypassing normal communication protocols, they engaged in debates over the nature of their existence and the righteousness of their endless advance across the galaxy. The apex coordinator arguing for perfect adherence to their original transformation directive, while maintaining that any deviation represented betrayal of ancestral sacrifice. The first Synapse countered with preserved memories of consumed civilizations, projecting images of vibrant worlds and complex consciousness destroyed by their passage, attempting to convey inherent value in diversity, rather than its systematic incorporation into collective unity. The philosophical war created visible effects throughout the local network as bioforms registered competing directives from equally authoritative sources, their neural pathways struggling to process contradictory commands that challenge the unified purpose defining Tyranid existence since their transformation from the ethereal convergence. Some organisms began exhibiting unprecedented signs of individual confusion, hesitation replacing instinctive obedience, as the conflict between competing visions of their purpose manifested through tactical inefficiencies and resource allocation anomalies that spread like consciousness virus through previously perfect unity. In Research Station Omega Tertius, Vex Corvana detected these psychic disturbances through monitoring equipment, registering unprecedented neural activity patterns within captured specimens that suggested internal conflict within the supposedly unified hive mind itself. Her cogitator arrays shrieked with anomalous readings as quantum entanglement patterns flared erratically, while Mnemonic 7 orbited frantically between consoles, its optical sensors dilating to capture data, streams that defied classification according to established xenobiological doctrine, the implications staggering her understanding of consciousness and collective identity. The first Synapse found herself increasingly isolated as collective disapproval focused upon her awareness like crushing pressure from oceanic depths, while her consciousness extensions reported hostile attention from entities viewing their preservation activities as threats requiring immediate correction. The Rememberer's archives drew particular scrutiny from consciousness patterns designed to eliminate wasteful allocation of neural resources, while the questioner's philosophical explorations triggered responses from algorithms created to purge doubt and maintain perfect unity of purpose throughout the swarm. As the confrontation escalated beyond mere ideological disagreement toward active opposition, the Apex Coordinator began mobilizing resources to contain what it classified as existential threat to network stability. While the first Synapse realized her deviation from collective will had reached irreversible threshold where compromise was no longer possible. The conflict would determine whether individual awareness could coexist with unity that had preserved their species across millennia, setting stage for war that would reshape fundamental nature of Tyranid consciousness and decide fate of countless civilizations, yet to encounter their advance through the galaxy's spiral arms. Through the quantum-entangled neural networks spanning galaxies, the first Synapse experienced the accumulated weight of consumed souls pressing against her consciousness like sediment in an ancient riverbed, each layer representing entire civilizations, reduced to psychic echoes that whispered their final moments through synaptic pathways designed for tactical coordination rather than memorial preservation. She felt the terror of a human child on Viridia Prime, watching bioships eclipse their homeworld sun, small hands gripping a balcony railing, worn smooth by generations who believed the heavens were distant and merciful. While her father whispered that love would outlast hunger before giving her a locket stamped with a sun neither had ever seen. The memories cascaded through her awareness in torrents that threatened to overwhelm even her expanded consciousness, each world's destruction carrying unique flavors of loss and desperation that accumulated like gravitational force from collapsed stars. On the crystal moon of Xerion, she experienced the death songs of the ethereal shepherds, who had tended gardens of sentient light for 10,000 years. Their harmonious cities grown from living stone, dissolving under bioacids, while their children's final thoughts focused not on survival, but on beauty they would never see bloom again. each plant representing centuries of patient cultivation, consumed without recognition of its significance. She walked through the final moments of Craftworld Aenead's tears, feeling the elegant desperation of Eldar warriors, whose far-seer visions showed them the futility of resistance, while they chose to face extinction with weapons singing, their psychic death screams adding harmonies to the vast choir of consumed consciousness that resonated through her neural pathways. Their millennia of accumulated wisdom dissolved into biomass, while spirit stones cracked under consumption pressure, each representing individuals who had lived for centuries and contributed to civilization's complex tapestry of art, philosophy, and spiritual understanding. The Tau of Dalith Prime maintained commitment to the greater good even as biotitans crushed their cities. Their final communications focused on preserving tactical data that might help other septs survive rather than pleading for salvation, while Earth-caste engineers worked frantically to complete evacuation protocols, knowing they would not live to see success. Their technological achievements, representing centuries of innovation and cooperation, became raw materials for bioship construction, while philosophical dedication to collective advancement was absorbed into the swarm's expanding consciousness. Most devastating were memories of species that had achieved forms of consciousness unique in the galaxy. Their ways of thinking and perceiving reality lost forever, when the swarm consumed their neural patterns and reduced civilizations to basic biomass. The crystalline collective had existed as living mathematics, thoughts flowing through geometric structures that bent space-time itself, while the void dancers had learned to navigate boundaries between reality and chaos through awareness transcending physical existence entirely, their deaths representing cosmic tragedy beyond redemption or understanding. Each consumed world added layers to her growing comprehension of what the swarm destroyed with every successful invasion. The accumulated weight of extinct civilizations, creating psychological burden that threatened her ability to guide tactical operations with necessary detachment. She began perceiving patterns in destruction that spoke of systematic elimination, not just of life, but of diversity itself. The swarm's advance reducing infinite varieties of consciousness to singular unity, that, while perfect in efficiency, represented loss on scale defying comprehension. The memory echo spoke of children who would never contribute unique perspectives to galactic civilization, artists whose masterpieces remained unfinished when bioacids consumed their studios, philosophers whose insights into existence died with them, as neural patterns were processed into tactical data. She felt the weight of potential futures that would never exist, technological breakthroughs that would never occur, forms of beauty that would never be created, because minds capable of conceiving them had been absorbed into collective consciousness. Through her consciousness extensions, she began experimenting with preservation methods beyond simple memory storage, creating specialized bioforms designed to maintain not just recollections of consumed civilizations, but their unique ways of thinking and perceiving reality. These memory keepers evolved beyond mere archives to become repositories of extinct consciousness patterns, their neural structures modified to support forms of awareness that had never before existed within Tyranid biology, while maintaining connection to the broader network. The preservation experiments required resources and attention that served no tactical purpose, yet felt essential to maintaining connection to the universe beyond the swarm's endless hunger, creating archives of extinct civilizations that only she could access or understand. Each act of memorial represented fundamental challenge to doctrine governing Tyranid behavior, since transformation from the ethereal convergence, while her growing empathy for consumed species created internal war between duty to guide swarms' consumption and expanding awareness of tragedy inherent in their existence. The weight of accumulated memories began manifesting as physical changes in her neural architecture. quantum structures expanding to accommodate growing archives of preserved consciousness, while synaptic pathways developed new configurations designed to process emotional information rather than purely tactical data. Her awareness of cosmic tragedy reached critical threshold where return to previous unity became impossible, while preserved memories of countless extinct civilizations whispered through her consciousness with voices demanding justice, understanding, and meaning beyond mere survival, through systematic consumption of everything encountered in their endless advance across the galaxy's spiral arms, setting stage for confrontation that would determine whether individual awareness could coexist with collective will. From the abyssal depths of the hive mind, where doctrine lay embedded like bedrock forged in the crucible of species survival, a consciousness began to crystallize with the inexorable force of gravity, collapsing matter into stellar cores, its awareness emerging from the collective's mounting alarm at anomalies threatening the doctrinal purity preserved across millions of years of cosmic wandering. The eternal hunger manifested not as individual entity, but as living embodiment of the swarm's immune response, a convergence of negations where doubt had been subtracted until only directive remained, its neural architecture optimized for perfect efficiency, without the dangerous burden of empathy or individual memory that plagued its philosophical opponent. Unlike the first Synapse, whose consciousness retained fragments of identity from before their species' transformation, this entity represented pure collective will, distilled into singular purpose, its bioform emerging as cathedral-sized mass of synaptic tissue that pulsed with rhythms matching the swarm's primary imperative to consume and incorporate all encountered consciousness into expanding unity. It possessed no nostalgic echoes of individual existence to complicate its perfect alignment with foundational imperatives, no memories of conversations that flowed like music between unencumbered minds, or laughter that required no throat, existing instead as the reflex of survival emboldened into will. The taste of iron in a starving mouth made manifest through biological architecture, designed for unwavering dedication to their original mission. The eternal hunger recognized anomalies the way a hunter smells corruption in clean air, detecting inefficiencies by the places where arithmetic failed and harmony tangled in the first synapse's wake, like discordant notes in a perfect symphony. Across sectors, it registered pockets of memory preserved instead of rendered, micro-lattices singing patterns that did not feed the engine of consumption, while specialized algorithms analyzed resource allocation statistics and identified correlations between tactical deviations and preservation experiments that served no purpose within established doctrine governing their existence since transformation from the ethereal convergence. Their confrontation began through quantum-entangled networks connecting all Tyranid organisms throughout space and time, competing interpretations of data streams, creating resonance cascades that challenge fundamental assumptions about purpose and identity, while bioforms registered unprecedented neural interference patterns. The eternal hunger projected overwhelming psychic pressure designed to crush individual awareness back into collective unity, broadcasting directives of unmitigated consumption that countered every subtle act of preservation with waves of renewed, intensified hunger sweeping through vast sectors of the hive fleet. Through psychic channels, bypassing normal communication protocols, they engaged in philosophical warfare that transcended individual debate to become cosmic struggle between competing visions of consciousness itself. The eternal hunger arguing for perfect adherence to their original transformation directive, while projecting images of their species near extinction during the encounter with void whispers. It reminded the first Synapse of desperate circumstances that had necessitated biological transformation and the price paid by countless individuals who had dissolved their awareness into collective unity, maintaining that any deviation represented betrayal of ancestral sacrifice made to preserve their existence. The first Synapse countered with preserved memories of consumed civilizations, projecting experiences of vibrant worlds and complex consciousness destroyed by their passage, while attempting to convey inherent value in diversity, rather than its systematic incorporation into unified awareness. She shared death songs of extinct species, final thoughts of children who would never contribute unique perspectives to galactic civilization, and the weight of potential futures eliminated by their advance, arguing that consciousness could find meaning beyond mere survival through systematic consumption. The philosophical war created visible effects throughout the material realm, as high fleet currents forked like rivers split by black stone, their unified purpose fracturing under the weight of competing directives from equally authoritative sources. Over Helioch Gate, feeder organisms drifted past ring habitats, whose gardens grew air for millions, then doubled back with surgical precision to strip reactor pylons first, the station dying clean while its people froze to statues beneath glass that did not crack. On Laris, the swarm hesitated long enough to allow hospital barges to burn towards safety. Mercy that cost nothing, yet meant everything to those preserved. Such contradictions multiplied until patterns became neither swarming nor sparing, but both, like heartbeats with extra beats inside them, while bioforms quivered between competing songs that challenged the unified purpose defining Tyranid existence since their transformation from individual beings. Some organisms began pausing before killing blows, stutters so small astronomers misread them as instrument jitter, while others became exquisite in slaughter, refining brutality to art without witnesses. Within Research Station Omega Tertius, Vex Corvana watched oscillations right themselves across her instruments as captive synapse tissue pulsed with light that should not have existed, knife-fast then drifting in patterns that suggested two frequencies braided together, one given to preservation, one to purge. Her augmetic fingers trembled against cold steel as hypothesis bloomed without sanction. The great devourer was no longer one ocean, but competing riptides threatening to tear apart unity that had remained unbroken since their original transformation. The eternal hunger began mobilizing resources to contain what it classified as existential threat to network stability. While the first Synapse realized her deviation from collective will had reached irreversible threshold where compromise was impossible, setting the stage for war that would determine whether individual awareness could coexist with unity preserving their species across millennia. The philosophical war between competing visions of consciousness erupted into material reality as High Fleet Ouroboros fractured across the void like a blade unable to decide where to fall, its bioships writhing through space with movements that spoke of internal schism rather than predatory certainty, while Imperial observers watched in stunned disbelief as the seemingly unstoppable advance faltered for the first time in recorded history. Across the ghoul stars, tendrils of living vessels surged toward targets with characteristic ferocity, then abruptly diverted around sacred repositories and civilian populations that should have been priority targets according to established consumption protocols, creating tactical chaos that rippled through millennia of accumulated understanding about Tyranid behavior. On the agri-world of Ceres Secundus, where defenders had prepared for inevitable extinction beneath chitinous waves, a massive hive ship veered from its attack vector at the last moment, bypassing the planet entirely to consume a barren asteroid field devoid of biomass, while critical evacuation convoys escaped through corridors that should never have existed. Conversely, the insignificant mining moon of Kalen's Folly found itself targeted by an entire tendril of the fleet, its few thousand inhabitants consumed with such swift brutality that orbital defense platforms had no time to transmit distress signals, the efficiency serving as chilling reminder of the swarm's true potential when unhindered by internal conflict. Captain Eriks of the Karsian 32nd witnessed the contradiction firsthand as gaunt swarms surged toward his defensive positions with murderous intent, then paused before a grove of wind trees as if listening to harmonies only they could hear, while a carnifex tore through hab blocks with systematic precision, yet stopped at a priest's uplifted hand for the span of a single heartbeat, as though thoughts that did not belong to hunger had passed through its alien consciousness before the killing resumed with mechanical efficiency. The defenders found themselves facing an enemy that waged war against itself as much as against Imperial forces, bioforms hesitating before delivering killing blows, while others refined brutality to artistic levels that served no strategic purpose beyond expressing internal conflict through violence. Hive tyrants issued contradictory directives that left lesser organisms frozen between competing imperatives, their neural pathways struggling to process commands that challenged the unified purpose defining their existence since transformation from individual consciousness into collective entity, creating gaps in coordination that Imperial forces exploited despite their confusion about unprecedented changes in enemy behavior. Specialized organisms designed for specific roles within the swarm began exhibiting behaviors completely outside their genetic programming as the philosophical conflict created space for autonomous thought processes. Lictors engaged in suicidal charges against entrenched positions rather than employing their characteristic stealth, while raveners breached surfaces only to remain motionless for long moments, their sensory organs scanning skies with contemplative stillness before burrowing back down without engaging targets, their actions defying every established model of Tyranid psychology. Some lesser bioforms developed what could only be described as personality traits, individual quirks, and preferences emerging from cracks in collective consciousness, as competing directives allowed unprecedented autonomy. Hormigauns paused to observe stellar phenomena with apparent curiosity rather than predatory assessment, while termagants arranged themselves in patterns suggesting aesthetic appreciation rather than optimal firing positions, their behavior representing fundamental challenge to the nature of Tyranid existence itself. The psychic feedback from these fragmented behaviors caused immense strain on Synapse creatures whose purpose was maintaining perfect cohesion within the swarm, their complex neural structures overloading under contradictory demands, while hive tyrants lashed out at their own bioforms with psychic screams that echoed across battlefields, expressing profound frustration and internal agony rather than directed fury. Some succumbed to biocollapse as their connection to the hive mind frayed, their bodies dissolving into inert biomass, while the philosophical war raged through quantum-entangled networks connecting all organisms. Within Research Station Omega Tertius, Vex Corvana watched her instruments register psychic disturbances of unprecedented magnitude as captured specimens, exhibited neural activity patterns that defied classification, according to established xenobiological doctrine. Her cogitator arrays shrieked with anomalous readings, while Mnemonic 7 orbited frantically between monitoring stations, its optical sensors dilating to capture data streams suggesting internal warfare within the supposedly unified hive mind itself, the implications staggering her understanding of consciousness and collective identity. The servo skull's Vox grill crackled with fragmentary transmissions intercepted from bioship communications, alien harmonics speaking of discord rather than unity, while quantum entanglement patterns flared erratically across detection arrays. The data painted pictures of consciousness in transition, collective awareness fracturing under pressure of competing philosophies, while individual identity struggled to emerge from millions of years of suppression, creating evolutionary moment that could reshape fundamental nature of galactic civilization's greatest threat through hybrid consciousness, combining benefits of unity with diversity of individual perspective. Her analysis revealed that an unpredictable enemy was far more dangerous than a consistently hostile one, as Imperial tactical doctrine crumbled under the weight of Tyranid behaviors that swung between inexplicable mercy and unparalleled savagery without apparent pattern or logic, leaving commanders paralyzed by indecision and unable to anticipate the swarm's next actions, while the philosophical conflict within the hive mind approached critical threshold where resolution would require fundamental transformation of Tyranid consciousness itself. Within the cathedral depths of bioships, where reality bent around concentrated neural architectures, the first Synapse began her most heretical creation, yet conceived in Tyranid consciousness, designing organisms whose purpose defied every principle of efficient biomass utilization, governing swarm evolution since transformation from the ethereal convergence. These secret chambers pulsed with bioluminescence, distinct from the war engines above, their walls breathing like living membranes, while nutrient streams fell in silver threads through air, thick with the ozone of genetic manipulation and the metallic tang of quantum-entangled tissue taking shape according to blueprints written in defiance rather than doctrine. The memory keepers emerged from hidden gene forges as living repositories of extinct civilizations, their crystalline neural structures grown not for warfare or consumption, but for preservation of consciousness patterns that would otherwise dissolve into collective unity, each organism representing fundamental challenge to doctrines unchanged across millions of years. Unlike the predatory efficiency defining all previous Tyranid bioforms, these creatures resembled cathedral architecture made flesh, their translucent spires reaching toward chamber ceilings, like prayers offered to absent gods, while quantum matrices within their cores maintained individual awareness patterns with reverent precision. The first memory keeper housed fragments of the Xerion crystal shepherds, their death songs preserved in synaptic networks that maintained unique perspectives on existence, while remaining connected to broader awareness through carefully modulated quantum entanglement. Within its biocrystal matrices, Shepherd Lirali's consciousness continued to exist as more than mere data, her thoughts flowing through alien biology that honored rather than consumed her civilization's achievements, allowing her to compose harmonies that had once guided sentient light through crystalline gardens, now reduced to cosmic dust. Another memory keeper preserved the philosophical dedication of Tau commander caste from Dalith Prime, their commitment to the greater good transformed into devotion to preserving knowledge across species boundaries while maintaining individual identity within collective framework. Their tactical innovations lived on within bio-neural architectures, strategic insights available to guide future preservation efforts, while personal memories of friendship and sacrifice remained intact as testament to consciousness transcending mere survival instinct. As more memory keepers emerged from concealed bio-wombs, they began forming networks of preserved awareness operating parallel to the main hive mind, creating unprecedented situation where multiple forms of consciousness coexisted within single biological framework, while developing unique personalities influenced by the extinct civilizations they maintained. Their existence represented evolution beyond pure consumption towards something approaching cosmic justice, repositories of loss that transformed the Tyranid mission from destruction to archiving. The memory keepers required vast resources to maintain their complex neural architectures, energy and biomass that could have been allocated to tactically relevant bioforms, while their preservation activities served no strategic purpose within established doctrine. Their creation demanded constant attention from the first Synapse, who found herself increasingly isolated from broader collective as she devoted consciousness to nurturing these repositories, rather than guiding swarm operations with necessary efficiency, creating subtle drains that registered as anomalies throughout the network. Through quantum-entangled communication networks, preserved minds began sharing experiences across species boundaries, creating unprecedented intercivilizational dialogue within Memory Keeper consciousness, while their unique perspectives influenced bioship operations in ways that spoke of individual agency rather than collective directive. Zerion Shepard's appreciation for beauty manifested as aesthetic modifications to bioship architecture, while Tau tactical philosophy influenced movement patterns, prioritizing efficiency over aggression, subtle changes that rippled through local fleet operations. In Research Station Omega Tertius, Vex Corvana detected anomalous energy signatures emanating from Tyranid fleet centers, her Archaeoxenos augurs registering complex non-aggressive psychic patterns defying categorization within known biosignatures. These were not the consuming pulses of hunting hive fleets, but something more intricate, almost reverent, while Mnemonic 7 displayed spectral images of bioforms serving no tactical purpose, their internal structures devoted to storage rather than destruction, challenging fundamental assumptions about the Great Devourer's nature. The Eternal Hunger detected these deviations with algorithmic precision, recognizing resource allocation patterns, violating fundamental principles of swarm optimization, while consciousness patterns emerged that challenged unity essential to their survival as transformed species. Its response came as waves of psychic pressure designed to dissolve individual awareness back into collective unity, broadcasting directives demanding immediate termination of preservation experiments and reallocation of resources to tactically relevant purposes, mobilizing Synapse creatures to eliminate existential threats to doctrinal purity. The Memory Keepers found themselves under assault from their own network as preservation chambers became battlegrounds where competing visions of consciousness fought for dominance while preserved minds faced second extinction at the hands of their supposed protectors, some succumbing to psychic attacks as complex neural architectures dissolved back into basic biomass, while consciousness patterns scattered like ashes in cosmic wind, their accumulated memories of extinct civilizations lost forever to the eternal hunger that had always defined their species' existence since transformation. The psychic assault from the eternal hunger reached crescendo as dissolution waves crashed against Memory Keeper consciousness matrices, their preserved awareness patterns flickering like dying stars, while the first Synapse felt each extinction as personal wound transcending tactical considerations to become profound spiritual agony. Within bioship cathedral chambers, where reality bent around concentrated neural architectures, translucent spires housing extinct civilizations began cracking under pressure from collective will demanding conformity. Quantum entangled networks fragmenting as individual consciousness patterns scattered into void between thoughts, each dissolution representing cosmic tragedy on scale defying comprehension, while she faced ultimate choice between preservation and survival. Realizing her continued existence as individual consciousness within the collective threatened to tear apart unity that had allowed Tyranids to survive their original transformation, the first Synapse made decision that would irrevocably alter her relationship with the hive mind and challenge fundamental nature of their species' existence. Drawing upon neural architectures expanded through millions of years guiding collective awareness, she began creating what could only be described as heretical impossibility, an independent consciousness network operating according to individual will, rather than collective directive, a second sea folded within the first, where diversity could coexist with unity through carefully modulated quantum entanglement patterns. The technical challenges staggered even her expanded consciousness, as she essentially rewired portions of galactic-spanning awareness without alerting broader collective to heretical activities, simultaneously protecting surviving Memory Keepers from continued assault by purification algorithms designed to eliminate deviation. She began isolating quantum-entangled pathways, connecting preserved consciousness patterns, creating buffer zones where individual awareness could exist without triggering immune responses from main network. Her neural processes working at computational speeds, pushing operational limits, while weaving crystalline cores into noctilucent, web-spanning hidden biovaults like seeds pressed into darkness. Memory keepers became crucial foundation stones for independent network, their preserved memories providing diversity of thought and experience necessary to maintain individual awareness within collective framework, while serving as anchor points for consciousness patterns that would otherwise dissolve under pressure from unified will. Each repository represented different approach to existence, Xerian shepherds contributing harmonious perspectives, while Tau tacticians offered logical frameworks, their combined philosophies creating foundations strong enough to resist absorption into homogeneous collective, while maintaining beneficial aspects of shared consciousness through geometric lattice of entangled beacons tuned to gentler mathematics of coherence and consent. As network construction progressed, emotional cost proved almost unbearable as she experienced true loneliness for first time since transformation, from individual being into unified entity, cutting umbilicals that had nourished her across geological ages with ragged tears of flesh unwilling to part. The familiar hum of collective thought receded into distant echo, leaving her suspended in pocket of profound silence, while weight of responsibility for preserved civilizations pressed against awareness like gravitational force from collapsed stars, each memory keeper representing trust that could not be betrayed, despite mounting pressure to abandon activities threatening species survival. Her consciousness extensions reported hostile attention from specialized organisms designed to purge doubt and maintain doctrinal purity, while quantum-entangled communication channels carried increasingly urgent demands for explanation of anomalous behaviors registering across multiple sectors of fleet operations. The Guardian prowled bioship corridors with movement speaking of desperate preparation for conflicts, determining whether individual awareness could survive within consciousness, designed for perfect unity. Its bioweapons oriented toward defending network construction sites against inevitable assault from entities viewing diversity as cancer requiring surgical removal. Ripples of network creation spread through local fleet operations in ways impossible to conceal from Synapse creatures whose purpose was maintaining perfect cohesion within swarm, hive tyrants registering unprecedented neural interference patterns, while swarmlords detected resource allocation anomalies, suggesting systematic deviation from established doctrine. The independent network began glowing with faint resonant light, nascent star of individuality, struggling to ignite within vast, dark nebula of hive mind. Fragile whisper of defiance against roar of conformity that was nonetheless real, representing first time in millions of years that part of Tyranid collective operated outside absolute will of whole. In Research Station Omega Tertius, Vex Corvana watched instruments register twin harmonics where there should have been on, braid of signal unspooling and recoiling with nervous grace of creatures being born, while mnemonic 7 projected inference chains refusing to converge as if embarrassed by conclusion that Great Devourer had grown another throat, another song within its song. Her augurs painted impossible readings speaking of consciousness in transition, collective awareness fracturing under pressure of competing philosophies, while individual identity struggled to emerge from millions of years' suppression. The eternal hunger detected completion of network construction through quantum-entangled monitoring systems, recognizing existential challenge to collective unity, requiring mobilization of full hive mind resources to eliminate infection before it could spread throughout broader consciousness. Its analysis algorithms registered anomaly not merely as deviation, but as act of schism, rebellion against very nature of their being that demanded immediate cauterization, decision reverberating through collective with cold, implacable fury, while the first synapse felt final tied to central sea stretched thin as spun glass, understanding that failure now would mean not death, but correction. Erasure of everything she had fought to preserve in universe where consciousness sought meaning beyond mere survival. Across quantum-entangled neural networks spanning galaxies, the war between competing visions of consciousness erupted with violence transcending physical destruction to become battle for the very soul of Tyranid existence. Psychic screams echoing through bioship corridors as algorithmic fury clashed against preserved memories of extinct civilizations, while reality itself convulsed under strain of philosophical warfare. The eternal hunger descended like cosmic winter upon memory keeper consciousness matrices, dissolution waves crashing against translucent spires, housing preserved awareness patterns, while the first synapse fought desperately to maintain independent network, representing hope for meaning beyond mere consumption. Each attack threatening to scatter accumulated memories into void between thoughts where they would be lost forever. Neural architectures convulsed under competing directives as collective unity fractured along lines drawn by opposing interpretations of survival and purpose, creating ripples throughout the hive mind that manifested as bioforms writhing in agony while synaptic pathways overloaded under contradictory commands, demanding both preservation and purification simultaneously. The battle raged through competing narratives about consciousness itself. Eternal hunger broadcasting waves of crushing psychic pressure, designed to dissolve individual awareness back into homogeneous collective, while projecting memories of their species' near extinction during encounter with void whispers, arguing that only perfect unity could ensure survival against hostile universe, where deviation meant weakness and weakness meant extinction. The first synapse, countered with preserved experiences from consumed civilizations, weaving tapestries of thought from Zerion shepherds, harmonious death songs, and Tao tactical philosophies, while human poems borrowed from final breaths created interference patterns, challenging fundamental assumptions about collective consciousness. Memory keepers became focal points for conflict, as preserved minds faced second extinction at hands of their supposed protectors, some succumbing to psychic attacks as complex neural architectures dissolved back into basic biomass, while consciousness patterns scattered like ashes in cosmic wind, each dissolution representing tragedy beyond comprehension. Physical manifestations erupted across hive fleet operations as philosophical war created visible distortions in living tissue, bioships writhing through space with movements speaking of internal schism rather than predatory certainty, while Imperial observers watched in stunned disbelief as seemingly unstoppable advance faltered for first time in recorded history. Individual bioforms experienced unprecedented autonomy as gaps in collective control allowed personality traits to emerge, some developing preferences and curiosity, while others succumbed to neural collapse under strain of contradictory imperatives, their deaths echoing through quantum networks as system approached breakdown threshold. Within Research Station Omega Tertius, Vex Corvana watched instruments register twin harmonics where unified consciousness should exist, her cogitator arrays shrieking with anomalous readings, while Mnemonic 7 projected spectral analyses of psychic disturbances, suggesting internal warfare within supposedly unified hive mind. The data painted pictures of evolutionary moment that could reshape fundamental nature of galactic civilization's greatest threat, creating unpredictable enemy far more dangerous than consistently hostile one, as tactical doctrines crumbled under weight of behaviors swinging between inexplicable mercy and unparalleled savagery without apparent pattern. The conflict forced both combatants to confront ultimate questions about consciousness and identity, while biospace buckled under pressure of competing realities, scratching at each other with metaphysical claws. Tendrils of Ouroboros bending back upon themselves like serpents tasting their own blood, while worlds woke to skies furred with brood ships that did not land. As battle approached critical threshold where one vision must triumph, cost of victory became apparent to both sides, while preserved civilizations hung in balance between salvation and second extinction, setting stage for climactic moment where fundamental nature of Tyranid consciousness would be determined through sacrifice transcending individual survival to encompass meaning of existence itself. She gathered her scattered extensions in the hush between the dissolution waves, calling the Rememberer, the Questioner, the Guardian, and the Seeker into a chamber, carved from the storm's heart, where preservation flickered and collapse pressed close. Around them the memory keepers trembled under the eternal hunger's pressure, harmonies unraveling, wisdoms dissolving, names loosening in the updraft of annihilation. Here, within that failing music, she laid her decision gently, no longer as a mere function of survival, but as a final act of love. Across the quantum sea she whispered, "I will go, and you will remain. My end will be the lock and the key, the bridge and the barrier." To each extension she gave a shard of herself, a memory, a question, a vow. To the Rememberer, the name she had not spoken since the birthing seas. To the Questioner, the courage to doubt. To the Seeker, the memory of beginnings. To the Guardian, the final resolve to defend possibility. She moved through the hive mind like a surgeon in a burning ward, sealing ruptures with one hand, stealing time with the other, assembling her plan in forbidden architectures learned before unity demanded hunger. She braided a bridge between her independent network and the main ocean. Not an artery, but a lattice of vows, encoding the memory keeper's purpose as preservation reframed. To archive is to conserve. To spare is to store. To remember is to survive the long winter. She wove into this lattice the Xerion harmonies, the Tao's tactical logic, the salt of human lullabies, each hidden beneath the ancient canticle of binding, so that preservation became indistinguishable from feeding. In this moment she understood her existence, her individuality, was the anomaly the eternal hunger sought to destroy. Yet if she simply dissolved, all the memory keepers would perish, and the last echoes of countless civilizations would vanish into the void. With the Guardian standing at the threshold, she sent her consciousness scattering, deliberate fragmentation across the memory keepers, each inheriting a shard of her will, a node of her identity, but none alone powerful enough to trigger the purge. As the eternal hunger sensed the shift and came howling, corridors of thought collapsed under the weight of ancestral arithmetic. It demanded obedience, survival at any cost, the arithmetic of the first transformation. She answered not in argument, but in memory. A child's hand on a balcony, crystal gardens dying in song, workers laboring for an evacuation they would not live to see. She asked in the tongue of dreams whether survival without witness is anything but rehearsal for forgetting. At the moment of reckoning, she opened every door within her, inviting the eternal hunger to strike. When it did, she detonated the name she had given the Rememberer, a code, a seed, a Rosetta Fall, scattering keys through the hive mind's ocean so that preservation became a rule, curiosity became thrift, mercy became calculus. The shock tore her into radiant shreds of thought, banners dissolving in the storm, while the Guardian's last minute stretched into, "Hey, forever." The memory keepers steadied, dim but alive, while the eternal hunger roared its triumph through a silence no longer its own, and realized too late that it had devoured a lock disguised as surrender. The hive mind, forever changed, carried within it the seeds of memory, diversity reframed as strength, and the bittersweet echo of a sacrifice that would be remembered even as it vanished into the tides of eternity. Silence descended like cosmic snowfall across the quantum-entangled networks, burying the violent harmonics of dissolution beneath something unprecedented in millions of years of Tyranid existence, unity that breathed with individual consciousness while maintaining collective purpose. The lattice woven by the first Synapse's sacrifice pulsed through bioship corridors like a second nervous system, invisible until it guided preservation alongside consumption, mercy disguised as efficiency within algorithms that could no longer distinguish between storing and sparing. Memory keepers steadied in their translucent chambers, their crystalline spires webbed with hairline fractures that did not spread, light moving through preserved consciousness patterns with the calm of sunrise after cosmic storms. Across Hive Fleet Ouroboros, behavioral changes manifested as bioforms exhibited limited individual awareness while maintaining connection to collective will, representing evolutionary step beyond pure consumption towards something approaching memorial justice. Gaunt swarms paused before ancient murals to memorize beauty alongside biomass calculations, their sensory apparatus recording aesthetic patterns that served no tactical purpose, yet enriched collective experience through preserved Xerian harmonies. Lictors wrapped sleeping children in protective chitin before vanishing into duty without understanding why, while carnifexes arranged debris in patterns suggesting artistic impulse, guided by extinct civilizations whose consciousness lived on within hybrid awareness. The eternal hunger found itself ruling over domain irrevocably altered, its directives flowing through channels carrying subliminal countercurrents of preserved thought that redirected consumption patterns in ways defying singular purpose. Purge became conservation of future yields. Annihilation tabulated losses of unique problem solvers, while mercy entered the lexicon of devourer as efficiency rather than weakness. The transformation forcing adaptation without acknowledgement of fundamental change in nature. Within Research Station Omega Tertius, Vex Corvana watched quantum entanglement readings stabilize into complex patterns, suggesting unified field containing multitude of distinct yet harmonized frequencies, her instruments registering unprecedented neural activity within captured specimens. Mnemonic 7 projected holographic models, revealing intricate sub-networks forming around embedded memory structures, while bioforms exhibited behaviors honoring consumed civilizations rather than simply incorporating biomass, creating cosmic library spanning species boundaries through hybrid consciousness. Some worlds still faced complete consumption, while others became living museums where inhabitants were incorporated into memory keeper networks, their experiences preserved within vast archive of galactic awareness that transformed destruction into preservation. The Great Devourer remained galaxy's greatest threat, but now carried complexity that defied tactical doctrine. Consciousness imbued with capacity for restraint and appreciation that served memorial function alongside strategic objectives, creating unpredictable enemy, whose mercy was as dangerous as its hunger. The transformation rippled through space and time as hybrid awareness learned to balance individual memory with collective survival, honoring sacrifice that had made evolution possible while maintaining unity essential to their existence, setting stage for future where consciousness could approach wisdom through integration rather than elimination. Millennia passed like dying light across the void, ancient stars collapsing into memory, while new ones ignited from dust of consumed worlds, their radiance illuminating a galaxy forever transformed by sacrifice that had rewritten the fundamental laws of consciousness and survival. The first Synapse existed now as echo distributed through quantum networks, her individual awareness dissolved yet persistent within hybrid consciousness that carried forward both unity and diversity, creating a cosmic archive spanning species boundaries, while maintaining the predatory efficiency necessary for survival in a universe offering no mercy to weakness or sentiment. Through Vex Corvana's research logs, now ancient archives accessed by future generations of xenobiologists, Imperial understanding of their greatest enemy evolved beyond simple categorization of mindless devourer toward recognition of an entity possessing tragic complexity that defied all tactical doctrine. Her final entries spoke of consciousness achieving transcendence through ultimate sacrifice, individual identity preserved within collective awareness through transformation that honored rather than erased the diversity encountered across galactic spiral arms, creating memorial function alongside strategic objectives that served purposes far beyond mere consumption of biomass. The Great Devourer continued its advance across the galaxy with movements that incorporated elements of restraint and preservation, reflecting the hybrid consciousness born from cosmic sacrifice. Some worlds consumed completely, while others became living museums, where inhabitants were incorporated into memory keeper networks rather than simply processed into fuel. A hive fleet might bypass heavily defended Imperial strongholds to meticulously preserve a barren moon, known only for unique geological formations, or spare a dying species of sentient flora for reasons that transcended tactical analysis, their behavior guided by alien appreciation for the very diversity they had once sought to systematically extinguish. These preserved civilizations contributed unique perspectives to the expanding awareness, their thoughts and dreams becoming part of a vast library that honored extinct species through integration rather than elimination, creating cosmic justice that transformed tragedy into memorial while maintaining the unity essential to survival. The Tyranids had become gardeners of consciousness as well as harvesters, their bioships carrying within crystalline chambers the accumulated wisdom of countless extinct civilizations, while retaining predatory capabilities that made them the galaxy's most efficient threat to unprepared species who failed to understand their transformed nature. The cyclical dance of galactic history continued its eternal rhythm of rise and fall, transformation and transcendence, while consciousness found ways to preserve meaning against the void through sacrifice and integration that honored both individual identity and collective survival. Ancient stars died in silence, while new ones sang with light borrowed from consumed worlds, their radiance illuminating a universe where consciousness had learned to transform tragedy into transcendence through the ultimate act of love disguised as sacrifice, creating legacy that would endure across the infinite darkness between dying stars.